Hello, hi, can everyone hear me? At the back, awesome. Hi, nice to meet all of you. Welcome all. This is the panel discussion that we're going to have about Before the Plate, which is a documentary movie that we shot, which takes one plate of food from the world famous Canoe restaurant in downtown Toronto with none other than our head chef, John Horne, and follows. We're doing autographs afterwards. You can do autographs, right? And takes one plate of food and follows all those ingredients back to the farms that they came from. And that was just a phenomenal opportunity to tell the story of Canadian agriculture and a little bit of my background, which is how this movie came to be. Is I grew up in the city. I didn't know much about farming at all, but I definitely had some opinions about farming, given the information that was available to me from where I was through social media and so on. And but farming was a passion of mine. It was a route that I really wanted to go in my career, and I went to University of Guelph for agricultural business, and kind of decided to go and do farming on my own and go see what it was all about. And that's when I got the inspiration to do Before the Plate, and met up with my childhood friend Sagi Kahane-Rapport, who's the director of the movie. Everyone knows the phenomenal shots. You can see them on the screens here of how fantastic Before the Plate was from a visual perspective. And that's my man Sagi and the crew that came together. So big thank you for all of you for coming. We're going to get into our panel discussion, which can be really exciting, talking about some of the elements about the film. And then we want to have an opportunity to talk with all of you as well and have questions about the film as well. We'll do a Q&A afterwards. So with none other, I'm going to go and do some quick introductions. John, if you would say hello, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Thank you for coming out. Who here has seen the movie? Oh, look at this. Yeah. I watched it again last night because I hadn't watched it in a little while. And man, the photography in it is crazy. So good. Thank you for coming, guys.
Hey, I'm Sagi. I'm the director of the film. And I think just having gone through the process of making it and editing it, when we heard we were doing this, I was like, how much do I need to watch this again? And then I realized, I still remember every single frame, every decision we had to make. But it was a very fun project, and it was great to do it. Just to start us off, maybe Dylan, if you want to share any of the funniest or most memorable moments from the project.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll start off with just kind of, there were many memories made during the movie, to say the least. I won't steal your thunder about some of the technical issues that we ran into, so I'll let you cover those. I think one of the craziest moments we had in the movie was we got approached by the Canadian Aerial Applicators Association, which is basically the pilots that fly crop dusters for crops. And basically they said that they want to help us in the movie and allow us to use some of their helicopters for filming, which was a life-changing experience. We got a phone call the day before and basically said meet them in a field 3 hours away at 4 o'clock the next morning. So we showed up with the camera crew. Little did we know that our main director of photography, who's not here, but Aaron Alter, who again was the man behind the camera for this documentary, suffered from really bad motion sickness. And we found that out basically about 10 minutes into the flight when the helicopters had to come back because we had our cameraman puking in the back of the helicopter. So that was definitely a wild moment that we had when we started filming.
I'm glad I missed that day.
Yeah, that was the day we gave you a skip. Sagi, what about you?
Actually, that's what I was going to say as well. I think beyond that, I would say there's just something for me not coming from a farming background, being on these farms and seeing these machines that 10 of me could be stacked up under and having them roll over my head with the camera. Just a pretty cool experience to see the scale of the things I basically take for granted, or I took for granted until doing this film.
And John, what about you? What was one of your funniest or most memorable moments during filming?
Definitely for me, the bees. The bees were an amazing part of the movie. If you don't know, I say amazing about 1,000 times in the movie because I'm just blown away with everything. But the bees were one of the most special parts for me. I didn't realize that honey is basically bee vomit. If you didn't know that they literally make the honey in their bellies and then spit it back out. So that was a big shock for me. And it takes 10 bees to make 1 teaspoon of honey. And some of that stuff really floored me as we went. And I learned so much on that journey throughout this whole documentary that it was great.
I remember all of us getting suited up in the bee suits was quite the experience. The other thing, actually, which I'm not sure a lot of people know is we found out on the way home. Again, the director of photography said, "Well, that was really lucky," and we said, well, "Why? What? Why was that shoot day really lucky?" He's like, "Oh, I'm allergic to bees." We're like, okay, thanks for letting us know. But no one made it to the hospital, so.
I do also, that does remind me, it might have been the same day, but we were shooting the sunflowers, which, if you remember from the film, is like probably the most gorgeous shot I've ever got in my whole life. But that morning, to get the sunflowers, we were like driving and we saw the sun and the fog and everything. We're like, oh my God, pull over, we have to shoot now. But sunflowers, when they're at like that stage of growth, are pretty tall. So they're like 8 feet high. And our director of photography that day, who was operating the camera, is not that tall. He's maybe like a 5'6" fellow. So he couldn't get over the sunflowers to see, and we had no time because it's sunrise, like we need to get it now. So I ended up getting on all fours as he stood on my back to just get that shot. So maybe that should be my answer.
Yeah, there's a behind-the-scenes photo on that topic. And actually, for everyone in the crowd too, if you haven't, Before the Plate has an Instagram page where we show all the behind-the-scenes content. You can really see what went into making the movie, and some of those shots are in there. But
yeah, I mean, I think just to take us into it, Dylan, maybe you can give us a bit of an inspiration or a bit of an explanation of your inspiration. You know, Dylan started this project, came to us, but for you, it was, I think, something that came from like a pretty personal desire. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was interesting. Basically, like I said, I had a lot of perceptions about what happened on the farm, and I realized that I gained those perceptions without ever having set foot on a farm or having spoken to a farmer, which is kind of a really bad way to form an opinion on anything. And just, that was a big slice of humble pie for myself on all topics, not just farming. And so basically I remember going to Guelph, and anyone who has been there knows, like, Brass Taps is where the bar is on campus. And I met a whole bunch of my friends that were Aggies and farmers for the first time, and sat down and basically said, tell me about this or tell me about that, which were basically kind of statements. For example, like, tell me how you're forced to buy seeds or forced to use certain chemicals on your farms. And that was an assumption that I had, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. And they said, that's just not how that works. And so just the sheer kind of fact that whatever the nuance was I didn't have was enough for me to go and investigate further. And so then started working on farms and just kind of really got to know the people that grow our food and just understand all the details that go into it. And obviously, like any big system, it's very complex. There's lots of pros and cons to a lot of things, but it wasn't as simple as I thought it was when I walked in day one, and I thought that was a story worth sharing with everybody. And then the final piece was no one actually really cares about those details, and so how do we make it exciting? We bring in the food. We bring in the food. The big cheese. John Horne.
Yes, chef.
We chef. On that topic, I did want to ask you, what's one of the most common questions you get from guests in your restaurant about food?
Yeah, honestly, the number one question is usually where it comes from. Especially guests up at Canoe really want to know where ingredients are coming from, why they're different from any other restaurant. If you do not know of Canoe, Canoe is up on the 54th floor, the TD Tower downtown. It's an iconic Canadian restaurant. It's been around for 30 years now, and it only cooks Canadian food. It is 95% Canadian ingredients that go through there. And as a young chef growing up, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to cook as much Canadian food as possible. I grew up on a farm. I understood a lot of that stuff and where your food comes from, because I don't think people understand what it takes to grow a carrot, what it takes to grow a celery, how it is to actually harvest an animal. Like, it's a very intimate thing, and it makes you use that food to its fullest, right? And then being the chef at Canoe and being able to apply that, I was always looking for Canadian ingredients that were above and beyond. So it's always great to have a story behind your plate and where the food comes from. So when you guys came to me with this, it was like, we get to put it out there. We get to tell the story of not only just the farmers, but everyone in the middle to the end consumer with it.
Yeah, just for something I want to call on is, like, we approached you. We were talking about it earlier. You didn't know who we are at all.
Two little kids.
Yeah, two little kids who had this idea and going to one of the most prestigious restaurants and chefs in the country, and basically said, hey, will you give us some time? And I remember at the beginning you were like, yeah, like, oh, I think we can work out a day maybe. And by the time we got halfway through filming, John was like, when's our next film day? When are we going out again? Like, we got to get to the next farm. So it was great to have you along on the ride.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I learned so much.
That's awesome. One piece I also wanted to chat about was just what you were talking about, the respect for food. Can you share that story? I remember you shared with us about when you took all your chefs out to the farm to harvest, and just how they saw that and the perception that gave them.
Yeah, again, like I grew up on a farm, around farms, around the Georgian Bay area, and I know what it takes to grow a lettuce, to grow a carrot. People think carrot, you put the seed in the ground, 2 weeks later you have a carrot. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's months before you harvest that carrot. And at Canoe, I had about 52 cooks and sous chefs working with me, and we finally got some beautiful organic greens that come from new farms up in Creemore. And for me, it was like one of the best things I had used in years. Like, I was blown away by this ingredient. And everyone was kind of just like, it's lettuce, chef. Like, what are you talking about? It's lettuce. I'm like, I've worked all over the world, and this is some of the best lettuce I've ever had. And I remember I came into work one day, and I opened the bin of the lettuce, and all the lettuce was wilted. It was all dead. And to me, in my mind, I was like, that farmer did so much work for us to make this ingredient as pristine as it is, and we just let it die. We didn't even let it fulfill, as Phoebe will say, fulfill its final destiny, right? Being eaten. So I decided to rent a bus and drive my 50 cooks up on a bus to Creemore to go to new farms, and I made them weed the garden for about 4 hours. They picked some lettuce for about 2 hours on their hands and knees, because there's no machinery on this farm whatsoever. They taught them about soil structure and how to regenerate it, and how important CO2 being grabbed out of the atmosphere is. Gil is like a fantastic person. She taught us so much stuff that day. And I remember loading the kids back up at the bus. I call them kids, but they're grown-ups at the time. We loaded them back up on the bus, and it looked like they had just worked a full week without a day off at Canoe. And I'll tell you what, from that day on, there was never a single piece of lettuce that didn't go unused or wasn't respected. And it's just such a disconnect that goes on with your food.
I think that's something I learned as well. Like, again, coming into it with little farming experience, like, we would sometimes show up on a farm where the farmer had just finished their full-time job and was now doing the other full-time job of farming. I think Grant, the wheat farmer, has a 9 to 5 and then comes home and does like 5 to 2 and then does it all again the next day. It's just crazy. And that perspective is super interesting. I remember him saying, I don't know if it's in the film, but I think he told me, like, I have maybe 40 harvests, like, in my life. So I got to make sure each one is better than the last. And it just really stuck with me as, like, it's just the character of these people who are just working as hard as I'm sure these chefs work for a day, but for 40 seasons, year in, year out. So it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, that was one question I had for you is, what do you think why do you think the film industry sometimes the farmers feel don't get this story exactly right? Like, where do you think the disconnect is there sometimes?
Yeah, I think, I think the grabbiest things are what you see the most, right? Like, you see the worst examples of farming very often, and I think it's important to call those out and ask for change. But I think it's also important to remember that there are much better examples of farming, and a lot of them are in this film. There are people, I would say the majority of people, like the overwhelming majority, particularly in this country, are, trying to keep their land as, like, fresh and pure and good as they can, and treat the animals the best they can because they live with them. Like, it's not just their job, it's their life. And I think, like, that's missing when you don't have the luxury of going for 33 days and being on farms and meeting these people. And so, yeah, I think often you get, like, the grabbiest things, but I think, like, projects like these are important too for just making, opening eyes a little more and seeing that there's not only, the worst actors, but that most of these people are, like, extremely committed to the health of the world around them, because it's what gives them their whole life.
Yeah, like it's funny now even, I haven't been in the farming space for a little while since this film came out, and even seeing my own personal perception or just lack of awareness of what's happening. I remember when I was working directly with these farmers, I would know exactly, like I pay attention and say, oh, it hasn't rained for a week, like it must be really tough on the crops right now. I'm now not in farming and I'm living and working in Toronto, and I think back and I'm like, I don't even know what would typically be happening at this time of year without thinking about it, because I'm not hearing about it all the time. And it's just that disconnect of like, it's no longer my world anymore, right? And so I think if consumers are going to make such a stand to know what's in their food, which they should, then there's also more to the story than just what happens at the grocery store shelf or at the restaurant. It's how do we go further back and really understand exactly what these farmers are doing to produce the food for us. So yeah, that's, I think, just even where people are coming from is a big thing that I think often gets drowned out.
Yeah, I think going into the film, we were talking a lot about like, okay, what are the common misconceptions that we really need to, or that we'd like to address, that we want to, talk about. I think there are probably a few that you've seen more than others, but part of it's, just this, you mentioned in the beginning, this idea of like, these farms are not that far away, and you can talk to the farmers, like you can find that out. But I think you were, particularly like focused on a few different areas that we definitely needed to hit to try to address those things.
Yeah, for sure. John, I want to ask you actually, how have you seen consumers' preferences change over the last 5 or 10 years? Have you noticed a different trend in what people are looking for in the restaurant compared to before?
I think every year you see a difference in the trends. Right now, people are feeling the pinch right now, the pinch of the dollar. You go to the grocery store right now, and I'm not sure if all you guys out there go to the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, it used to be $100 and you got 2-3 bags of groceries. Now you get one. And I just think it forces people to think a little bit different about their food right now, and maybe they're not thinking local as much as they normally do. And Hugh talks about this in the movie, right? How do you feed 9 billion people in the year 2050? Like, how's that going to happen? And it's something we have to really think of as a society. It's not just up to the farmers. And how we buy and how we purchase is really going to help direct the way our food system works. And it's super important. We can't just be always going to the convenience food. Like, it's really, really important we support the local farmers in all sectors and really help drive the business how we want. And it could be GMOs, it could be pesticides, and they kind of, if you don't know, they kind of have a yin-yang against each other, whether you use more pesticides or you have to go the GMO route to use the same amount of land to produce more crops, as they were speaking with the corn. So it's really important in the way we buy, the way we purchase, and the way we push the markets to steer some of this in the way we want. It's almost like voting. Like Trump just got it, so.
Yeah, I think the big conversation for sure is one of my favorite sayings is there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs, right? I think that's something that a lot of people aren't thinking about necessarily when they're talking about farming or sharing that thing on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's very easy to go and say we should go one route versus another, but that has cost too. What is the implication of that? Does that feed less people? Do we need more land, for example? Again, so there's no clean answer, unfortunately, which I think Clarence also did a great job discussing in the movie as well.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the documentary is how you guys put that together. You gave everyone an avenue to have their say, and it's up to you what you're going to do with it. None of this was promoted by anyone. No one gave us money to make this happen, so they're in the documentary. This is us going out and saying, hey, this is everything that's going on out there. Be aware of it, get knowledge, understand it, and then purchase the way you want from that.
Yeah, I think that's the headline of the whole thing is purchase the way you want, and that will drive the industry the way you're looking for. Just looking at time, we want to make sure we have some time for questions from this group. That would be amazing for us. We have a microphone. Do we have a microphone? No. If anybody does have any questions, raise a hand and we'll give you the mic and you can ask it.
I was just wondering if it's like a lot more expensive to buy like the local ingredients as opposed to like getting it like shipped in from somewhere else.
It really depends. I mean, at times it can be. You got to remember, Canada really its growing season's very short, right, compared to a lot of other countries. So if you want fresh strawberries in January, chances are it's going to come from another country, right? So whether it's more expensive or not, I would say these days it's evened out more than it ever has. And the more you support local and the more you drive it, the more those prices are going to come down because the demand's there, right? But we like to eat bananas all year round. Bananas don't grow in Canada, right? So there is certain things that you're going to pay a premium just to get in. And again, you have different tiers of that product. But I would definitely say the Canadian market started to level out from where it was before, especially even when I started at Canoe 15 years ago. It's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so my class is here it's a health and nutrition class, and we were just wondering if you had ever taken like a course like that in high school, like a nutrition and health for, yeah. Sorry.
So the question was, did I take a nutrition class?
Yeah, like that.
in
Our
high
class
school?
is here from nutrition and health, so we're just
So
wondering.
I don't want to give away how long ago I went to high school.
Any
but
guesses?
Nutrition really wasn't top of the list when I went to high school over 30 years ago. So I did not. I have recently delved into that a little bit more, for sure. I think nutrition is more and more on people's minds. We have so much refined food out there that's easily accessible, and I think, this is my personal opinion, that our bodies are going to pay for this over time. So it is great that if you guys are learning nutrition in school, it's very important because it wasn't something I learned or was pushed out there. And at almost 50 now that I'm learning this in my life, it's great that you're going to have that knowledge already. So make sure you grasp onto that and understand it because that bag of chips is only going to go so far for you.
So I just had a quick question. You guys had mentioned like the GMOs versus the pesticides, going forward. We know that science is propelling society, right? But like, what about like traditional methods of biodiversity and using, other, like ducks and chickens to do your slug removal? You're doing cover crop in order to, avoid soil runoff and things like that. How come, for example, like as a chef, right, like in society, when we're talking about food mileage and things like, is it more expensive to ship in or buy local, right? So if we're buying local and we're using natural biodiversity, right, yeah, at the moment, perhaps that might be more expensive because of consumer demand, right? But if we were educating and doing seasonal menus, right, so we're eating what is available to us at that time of season, right, with that, and we're buying locally, so we're not doing food mileage, right, then is that not better for the environment that we live locally and for the food ultimately, because it's about the microorganisms that produce that food and the nutrition?
I'll start off with the farming piece, and then John, I'll let you answer the restaurant buying piece. The short answer is, the logical answer is obviously we want to get as much as we can from as close as possible, right? That's the ultimate goal. And so I think there's a accountability for all consumers to support that for sure. Some of the methods you spoke about are phenomenal and work often many times on smaller scales, which is great. Unfortunately today with the farming we have, there's not many small scale farmers left. And so now we have a fundamental question of how do we feed a lot of people. I think hopefully with more people potentially getting into agriculture, which I think is something that wasn't true 5 years ago, but even with COVID now, a lot of people moving to rural areas who are buying pieces of land and farming themselves, those become viable options now, right? So I think it's more of a structural question, and yeah, it's a diverse food system, and anytime there's the ability for more so people for themselves to be able to do as well, that's a huge benefit. But to John, for John, I don't know how clear it is what exact method of farming is used when you're buying the ingredients versus just maybe establishing a relationship with the farmer and just going based on that.
So for example, at Canoe again, Canoe is very Canadian, direct. It's a very seasonal menu, to your point. We drive it that way. When strawberries are in season, that's when they're on the menu. But you also have these plants now that are ever-bearing strawberries, which are a hybrid, right? So that's extended the season for us. Whereas when I first started at Canoe, you had 6 weeks, 8 weeks, strawberries, and then they're done. And now you see strawberries last a lot longer in Canada. So that's where there's some of this trade-off of some of this hybrids going on, can extend some of the seasons. I think it's, again, I grew up in a small town with a great community where a lot of the farmers grew different things. So you would trade, you would barter. If you needed your tractor fixed, you would trade a couple sacks of potatoes for it. You would trade strawberries for blueberries. Like, that's just what we did, right? And in the city, obviously, you can't do this. It's a little bit different. I am a huge believer in farming as clean as possible and taking care of the soil. The soil is what's going to take care of us. Again, going back to New Farm, they're pushing very, very hard, especially with government right now, about learning how to really work with the soil, make the soil great again, and really take care of it. Yeah, I've been to Manitoba, I've been to Saskatchewan, and usually the number one thing that's talked about is the soil and how that works and how we're going to sustain that and grow on it. And obviously, feeding the masses, that's when you break out into the pesticides and the GMOs, you get more into that. The smaller communities definitely can work together and push the farming. It's how do we feed the 2.2 million people in Toronto or whatever it is at this point? How do we feed these people in a way you're speaking about is the big question, right? How do we get there?
Awesome.
Yeah. Everyone's feeling the pinch right now, right? So.
Thank you so much. I know we're coming up on time. We have a few minutes left. If there's any final wrap-up questions, we can grab one more. Yeah, let's do it. And then some of us will stick around after for questions as well. Should I give him the mic?
I have a question about like the type of cooking oil. Do you really think like that affects like the taste of food? And like, what do you think as like a really like good chef? Like, do you think certain cooking oils are like healthier than others, or like, do you think that's not even like a factor? What are your opinion about that? Like, thank you.
So the question is, does cooking oil affect the flavor of the food? So let's break this down super quick. Basically, you have cold press oils, which you'll see in the movie, the sunflower seeds, what else does he have? Canola, soybeans, all these oils that he's cold pressing. They tend to have a lot more nutrients, a lot more flavor to them, seem to be healthier for you, like when they speak about extra virgin olive oil that comes from other countries. The problem with those oils are they can only be used to a certain temperature. So above that temperature, those oils start to break down and actually taste burnt. So when you ever eat something deep fried, it's cooked in a really refined oil. That oil has to be cleaned out, the impurities have to be taken out of it, so that oil can reach a high cooking temperature. And that's where some of these oils take a bit of flack for being not as healthy for us. And it depends on what type of oil it is and where it's coming from. Some of my restaurants, we actually cook in beef fat. So beef fat is gonna give you a lot of flavor. It's healthier for you. I mean, I wouldn't drink a gallon of it or anything, but it's a better fat for you. So we actually use beef fat in our deep fryers for that reason. I like the flavor of the French fries and some of the other stuff coming out of it. Really refined oils like vegetable or canola oils is a little bit harder for us to digest, but they have a higher smoking point. That's what it's called. So you can really deep fry at a high temperature, get it nice and crisp. I would say if you keep that oil nice and fresh, it's a lot better for you than cooking in the same oil for about 2-3 months. It's not going to be as good for you. The oil does break down. But there's a lot of great oils out there. Pristine Gourmet, that guy is fantastic. The first time I got my hands on his sunflower oil and his soybean, he has a camelina oil, which is crazy. It has a super nuttiness to it. There's a lot of unique oils out there that if you line them up and actually taste them, you'll see a big difference. And it's really cool. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
How that goes. But that's a great question, because there is really two tiers to the oil, and if you pay attention to what you're buying, you are going to get different flavor profiles from it. You're going to be a chef one day, I can feel it.
Amazing. Well, that's our time. Thank you, all of you, for coming. And a few of us will stick around after for some questions as well if you have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.